August 15th, 2001, inside one of the most powerful companies in America, an executive discovers something terrifying. The company isn't just failing, it's a financial time bomb. She writes a warning letter to the CEO. He ignores it. 100 days later, $74 billion is gone. This is the true story of the woman who tried to stop Enron. The year is 2001. Enron is practically untouchable. They are the seventh largest corporation in America. They claim over $100 billion in massive annual revenues. But inside their pristine glass headquarters in Houston, the reality is a brutal, high-stakes gladiator arena. They operate on a ruthless system known internally as rank and yank. Every 6 months, employees are brutally graded against their peers. Fall into the bottom 15%, you are fired. Survive, you are handed massive cash bonuses. But here is where it gets incredibly dangerous. To survive this aggressive environment, executives are forced to meet impossible Wall Street expectations at any cost. The man pulling the strings is CEO Jeffrey Skilling. He is the brilliant, arrogant architect of Enron's infallible image. Then the unthinkable happens. On August 14th, 2001, after only 6 months in the top job, Skilling abruptly quits. He walks away from his masterpiece, citing vague personal reasons. Wall Street is completely stunned. The stock price begins to wobble, but one woman isn't. Her name is Sherron Watkins. She is an Enron vice president, and she knows exactly why the CEO is running for the exit. For weeks, Watkins has been quietly digging into the company's complex internal ledgers. What she finds makes her stomach drop. The math is a complete fiction, and that's when she realizes something terrifying. The company is secretly backing its own highly risky ventures, using its own stock as collateral. It is the blueprint for the ultimate financial scandal. She is staring at a multi-billion-dollar disaster, just waiting to detonate. If she's wrong, her career is over. If she's right, the company will inevitably collapse. Speaking out in this cutthroat environment is professional suicide, but she refuses to stay quiet. The livelihoods and life savings of 20,000 unsuspecting employees are hanging in the balance. To understand exactly what Watkins found, you have to look at the machinery running beneath the surface. In the 1990s, Enron adopted a completely legal but highly dangerous trick called mark-to-market accounting. Imagine signing a 20-year contract to supply natural gas to a city. Instead of recording the revenue slowly year after year, this trick let Enron estimate the entire 2 decades of future cash and log it as profit on day one. They were recording massive, inflated profits before a single dollar ever hit their bank account. But what happens when those speculative deals inevitably fail? You cannot just erase the projected profits. Wall Street would panic. The stock would tank. So Enron had to find a way to bury the evidence. The company needed a shadow network to hide its mounting failures, and they found the perfect man to build it. Enter Andrew Fastow. He is the chief financial officer, and he was handed an impossible task. He needed to make Enron's catastrophic financial losses vanish into thin air. His solution was a complex financial magic trick. Special purpose entities. On paper, these were independent outside companies created to fund specific projects or manage risk. In reality, they were shadowy shell corporations with bizarre names like Chuco, LJM, and the Raptors. Fastow used these shadow companies to execute aggressive financial schemes. Whenever Enron had a failing asset, they would secretly sell it to one of these shell companies. This maneuver completely wiped the toxic hidden debt off Enron's official ledgers. They parked their massive failures completely off the balance sheet. In an instant, they transformed catastrophic financial blunders into phantom revenue. Fastow himself even pocketed tens of millions of dollars in secret management fees for running the very entities that were bleeding his employer dry. At this point, you have to ask yourself, If you were an investor in the year 2000, looking at these spectacular revenue claims, do you think you would have spotted this accounting fraud? Let me know your theory in the comments below. And if you want to uncover exactly how elite corporations operate in the shadows, hit that subscribe button to help take Fleece to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Now you might be thinking, where were the watchdogs? The problem was that the referee was being paid by the star player. Arthur Andersen was one of the most prestigious auditing firms on the planet. They were supposed to protect the public, but Enron was paying them tens of millions of dollars in consulting and auditing fees. Instead of raising the alarm, the auditors bent the rules. They approved the high-risk deals. They simply looked the other way. But this entire shadow empire had one fatal flaw. To fund these shell companies, Enron secretly used its own stock as collateral. They were hedging their own massive risks, using their own inflated stock price as the safety net. It was an endless, desperate financial feedback loop. As long as the stock price kept going up, the illusion survived. The debt remained hidden, but if that stock price dropped by even a fraction, the entire web of special-purpose entities would become insolvent. The shell companies would be unable to cover their obligations. Billions in toxic debt would violently boomerang back onto Enron's official balance sheet. It was a towering house of cards, and this fragile, unsustainable architecture was exactly what Sherron Watkins had discovered. She knew the entire system was entirely reliant on the market's blind faith, and she knew that faith was about to run out. Armed with this horrifying knowledge, Sherron Watkins takes action. It is August 15, 2001. She drafts a blunt, anonymous letter and ensures it makes its way directly to the desk of Kenneth Lay, the company's founder and newly reinstated CEO. Her message is chilling. She explicitly warns him that the corporation is about to implode in a massive wave of accounting scandals. But writing an anonymous note is not enough. The stakes are simply too high. 1 week later, on August 22nd, Watkins steps completely out of the shadows. She walks directly into Kenneth Lay's plush executive suite. She sits across from him and slides a highly detailed 6-page document across his mahogany desk. She breaks down the terrifying reality. She explains the disastrous mechanics of Fasto's shadow companies. She warns Lay that the accounting fraud is entirely unsustainable. She begs him to come clean to the public and restate their earnings before the market finds out. She walks out of that room believing she has just saved the company. But imagine this. You discover a ticking time bomb in the basement of your office. You run to your boss, terrified, expecting him to evacuate the building. Instead, he hires the exact same guy who built the bomb to investigate whether it's actually dangerous. That is exactly what Kenneth Lay did. Instead of halting the conspiracy, Lay immediately moves to protect the golden illusion. He doesn't call the authorities. He doesn't bring in independent investigators. Instead, he hires Enron's own outside law firm, the exact same lawyers who helped engineer and approve the shady off-balance sheet deals in the first place. Predictably, they conduct a brief review and report back that there is absolutely no wrongdoing. It is the ultimate corporate governance failure. Watkins is ignored. Her desperate warnings are quietly pushed aside. But behind closed doors, the highest-ranking executives know the terrifying truth. They know the countdown has started. So, what do? They decide to save themselves. While thousands of loyal employees are repeatedly told that the company has never been stronger, the executives engage in aggressive insider trading. They quietly cash out tens of millions of dollars in their own personal stock. Kenneth Lay himself hosts company-wide meetings, aggressively encouraging his employees to keep buying Enron stock, calling it an incredible bargain. But secretly, he is selling off huge portions of his own shares back to the company. They are securing their immense wealth, and they are fully aware that the innocent people trusting them are about to lose absolutely everything. October 16th, 2001. The flawless illusion finally shatters. Enron releases its third quarter earnings report. Instead of the massive profits investors expect, they announce a devastating $618 million loss. Worse, they report a sudden, unexplained $1.2 billion reduction in shareholder equity. Wall Street freezes. Kenneth Lay scrambles to save the sinking ship. He jumps on conference calls, desperately begging analysts to stay calm. He promises his employees that the core business is stronger than ever, but the government is no longer buying the act. Within days, the Securities and Exchange Commission launches a formal inquiry into the shadowy partnerships. This is where the absolute panic sets in. A few miles away, inside the Houston offices of Enron's highly prestigious auditing firm, Arthur Andersen, a terrifying order comes down. The lead auditor realizes the federal government is closing in. He issues a chilling directive: destroy the paper trail. It is a frantic race against federal agents. Employees work around the clock. They aggressively feed tens of thousands of sensitive financial records into industrial shredders. They hit delete on massive archives of digital files and emails. They are trying to completely erase the evidence of the shadow empire, but shredding the evidence doesn't save them. This desperate cover-up will ultimately destroy the 89-year-old accounting firm. It will lead to a historic criminal conviction for obstruction of justice. Back at Enron, the financial bleeding is completely unstoppable. On November 8, the company is forced to do the unthinkable. They file a massive restatement of their finances. They publicly admit that nearly $600 million of their reported earnings over the last 4 years were a total fiction. The market reacts with violent speed. A brutal stock collapse completely wipes out billions in value. Shares that once traded at over $90 free fall to just 26 cents. But what happens next is the ultimate human betrayal. While the top executives had already quietly cashed out millions to protect their own wealth, the ordinary workers are trapped. In a suspiciously timed move, Enron changes the administrators for their employee retirement plans. Because of this sudden administrative freeze, thousands of loyal workers are entirely locked out of their 401k accounts. They sit helplessly at their cubicles. They watch the red stock tickers plunge on their computer screens. They are completely unable to hit the sell button as their life savings evaporate. Rival energy companies take one look at the toxic books and immediately walk away from emergency buyout deals. Credit rating agencies slash the company to junk status, triggering massive loan defaults. The clock has officially run out. In exactly 24 days, the 7th largest corporation in America is utterly destroyed. December 23rd, 2001, the music officially dies. Enron formally files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At the time, it is the largest corporate collapse in American history. Inside the Houston headquarters, the scene is absolute devastation. Imagine arriving at the office you've worked at for a decade, only to be handed an empty cardboard box. You are given exactly 30 minutes to pack up your personal life and exit the building forever, while security guards watch your every move. But losing their jobs is only the beginning of the nightmare for these 20,000 employees. Because of the strategically timed freeze on their retirement plans, these workers didn't just lose a paycheck, they watched their entire pensions and life savings evaporate into pennies. The financial blast radius extends far beyond Houston. Across the globe, trusting investors wake up to a staggering $74 billion loss. Teacher pensions are wiped out. College funds vanish into the pockets of a few elite executives. So, who finally pays the price? The federal government descends on Texas. The architects of this unprecedented fraud are forcefully dragged into the light. Andrew Fastow, the mastermind behind the Shadow Empire, realizes his magic tricks won't work on the FBI. He flips. He pleads guilty to conspiracy and strikes a deal to testify against his former bosses. Jeffrey Skilling refuses to back down. He marches into court and fights the charges, claiming absolute ignorance of the massive accounting fraud. The jury sees right through the lies. He is convicted of multiple counts, including insider trading, and handed a crushing 24-year federal prison sentence. And Kenneth Lay, the man who smiled warmly at his loyal employees while quietly cashing out millions of his own shares, is found guilty on all counts. But just months before he is scheduled to stand before a judge for sentencing, he suffers a fatal heart attack. He never spends a single day inside a prison cell. The market fallout is so incredibly toxic that the United States government has to intervene to restore public trust. They completely rewrite the laws of Wall Street, rapidly passing the landmark Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The new law drops a heavy hammer on corporate America. It mandates strict independent oversight and requires CEOs to personally certify the absolute accuracy of their financial statements under threat of federal prison. But what about the woman who saw the explosion coming? Sherron Watkins risked her entire livelihood to expose the truth. She saw the completely fake numbers and refused to stay quiet. She tried to stop the disaster, but the greedy executives chose to protect their illusion instead of their people. Her incredible courage illuminated the darkest corners of corporate greed, proving one universal truth: when a business empire is built entirely on lies, the inevitable collapse destroys everyone in its path.